Hey, in today's video, I want to talk to you about how I absolutely ruined my first contractor, the lessons I learned from that, and the results from those lessons. So, for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Lane Boland. I'm the founder of Remodel Commanders. In the past year and a half, we've helped over 40 general contractors get off the tools and build businesses that run on systems instead of direct supervision. Most, or rather, maybe not most, we'll say many have already added 1 million to their top line, and we've only had one failure. So, anyway, so my very first contractor. Long story short, my first career out of the Army was in finance, and one of my biggest or most important business mentors was a blue collar guy, and did very well for himself. And one day I woke up and realized that for the last 40 years, we've done nothing but educate cubicle monkeys who can barely forward email. Meanwhile, the average age of somebody that owns a $2 million or better contractor is over 60. They're all retiring at the same time, and there's nobody qualified to buy and run these companies. Well, when I say nobody, there's very few. And so it doesn't take a brain surgeon to understand the supply demand imbalance. So I quit my job in finance and jumped into contracting. So anyway, what started out as a window cleaner became a painter, became a kitchen and bath remodeler. And I never stopped to realize that maybe my estimating and my project management processes were suspect, because the way I responded to our cash flow crunches when we finally evolved into a kitchen and bath remodeler was simply just to sell more, sell more, sell more. And it just kept digging deeper and deeper and stacking MCA, that's a merchant cash advance, MCA on top of MCA. And then I got the bright idea that I was going to leave Kansas City with my shop running there, and I was going to go start one in Dallas. And then the one in Dallas led to one in Denver. And then the Dallas and Denver and Kansas City led to partnerships in Austin and Jacksonville. It was a mess. Did not end well. And by not ending well, it ended with me essentially fire selling the business for the value of the equipment to the employees. And I decided I was going to go to Puerto Rico. And the reason I went to Puerto Rico is because of the advantageous tax laws. When you're an Act 60 resident there, you don't pay any federal tax. You pay the island 4%. And so when the highest level of federal tax rate is above 40%, I saw that as a way to get it back twice as fast as I made it. This lesson cost me well over $250,000 of my own cash. Drained my IRA, maxed out all my credit card limits. It was not good. Anyway, so what I started doing there was just reflecting, introspecting, conducting an after action review, dissecting everything that went wrong and why. And from there, I was able to create the very first version of the Remodel command system that you all have been following inside my video channel. And then I caught the attention of my very first client, whom I will never speak his name again because of some betrayals. But yeah, so he was going through the exact same thing I just finished going through, except he was 8 times bigger. Right. And so applying the lessons. Now, what were those lessons I learned? Number one, you need to separate, don't charge for estimates, charge for proper design agreements. And if it doesn't require design, then you're not charging an estimate, you're charging a non-refundable diagnostic fee. But that's a point of nuance we can talk about in a second. Yeah, so number one, it was break apart the build contract from the design contract. Number two, was to treat the design contract like a retainer, just like a law firm or an architect, and give the customer a biweekly accounting of the time spent and what tasks were executed, what was achieved, in order to tamp down Karen's carousel. I just never understood why we would put a fixed price on something where we couldn't control a fixed, or we couldn't like control a fixed cost, right? There's no controlling the homeowner's desire to make changes. And you could say, well, they'll only get 2 revisions. But my response to you on that is, go ahead and tell a wealthy homeowner they can't have something and see how fast you get fired. So anyway, so that was lesson number 2. Lesson number 3 was everything begins and ends with the estimate. And to this day, I'm still the world's worst estimator. But what I learned was estimates are a function of design quality, right? And so your construction documents, your design drawings need to be airtight, because if they're not, you're going to have a very loose estimate. And if you have a very loose estimate, you're going to lose money in build. Fact, right? So, so number one, by folding your estimate time into that retainer, you can then afford high quality estimators. They're everywhere, right? Some of the best estimators I've ever hired or recommended their hire as a consultant are either they're just the worn out former remodelers, right? They had their own company, they're self-employed, they did well, their body can't take it anymore, but man, they've forgotten more about how to build and how long things take and what things cost than I could ever hope to learn. So in our industry, you have builders and you have talkers, right? Builders build, talkers talk. So if you're a talker like me, that's good with people, good with communication, good with sales, good with strategy, good with organization, good with management, you need to get yourself a builder. In fact, you need a couple builders, one inside the office to estimate, the other in the field to punch through the projects. Which then brings me to the third lesson I learned, which was the project director, project manager system I invented. I did invent that while I was at client number 1. And that's based off of builders build, talkers talk. The problem in our industry is that you have 3 main players. You got the salesman, you have the designer, and then you have the lead carpenter. And the salesman's getting paid a fixed percentage of the contract, and his relationship with the homeowner ends the moment the ink is dry on that contract. So here's the thing. If there's one big takeaway you take from this video, is this: if you want to predict somebody's behavior, look at how they're compensated, right? Sales guy is there's a strong economic incentive for him to say what he's got to say to get that contract signed. And the fact is, most of them are not from our industry, so they don't know what things cost. And so that's why these commission-only sales guys have this tendency to overpromise what we can deliver. Okay. Then you got the designer. Well, the designer advances their career based on winning awards. And winning awards is not necessarily aligned with your customer's budget. Okay. And because they're not builders, and because their relationship typically ends once the build contract is signed, there's a very strong economic incentive for them to go through a lot of mental gymnastics to justify how their design will fit the homeowner's budget, when in reality it won't. And then you have the lead carpenter. Now, this guy is probably the most able hand in your crew, but being amazing with a miter saw does not necessarily make you an amazing project manager. It's 2 different skill sets, right? And what I found is asking a lifelong tradesman who isn't a business owner to all of a sudden take on basically profit and loss responsibility of a project and manage 19 other trades is like asking a fish to climb a tree. And that guy is typically paid by the hour, And that poor soul is having to stuff 10 pounds of stuff, of promises from the designer and the salesman into a 5-pound bag, right? It's mission impossible. And so that's why we have crazy slippage, um, because the problems in build stem from a incomplete, inaccurate, insufficient estimate, which comes from an incomplete, inaccurate, insufficient design, which comes from poorly sold expectations at the point of sale. You can't just fix one thing. That's why it drives me nuts seeing these very talented consultants in our industry, so myopically focused on, just marketing or just sales. And it's like, no. And almost nobody teaches, estimating or how to recruit these guys or how to manage them. But that's beside the point. So the fourth thing I learned was performance compensation. Did you know that every single role in a residential general contractor can be tied to the performance of gross profit? So the lesson I learned is if you want employees to think like owners, they need to have a strong economic and a strong pay incentive to behave like an owner. And so the way I learned to do that was to create two metrics. They're called KPIs, key performance indicators. The first metric is what they got to do to keep their job. The second metric dictates their performance compensation, right? So you give them a base or a draw and you give them performance compensation, right? And you want the performance compensation to be about 30% of the total project. Okay. So, or not total project, but total compensation. So, for example, let's say you started working for me as a project director. That's the talker. I don't have salesmen anymore. I have project directors. PDPM stands for project director, project manager, no lead carpenters, sub everything. We'll get to that in a second. But so let's say you come aboard as a PD. I'm going to put you on a base salary, or I'm sorry, a draw against your salary. And the KPI to keep getting your draw is going to be meeting with one referral partner per day, whether that's a designer, a realtor, an architect, or an engineer, a mortgage loan officer. I don't care. One referral partner a day. Nobody eats lunch alone. So you got to do 20 meetings a month in order to qualify for your draw, because then that helps us get more business in the door. And then the second KPI I would do is, instead of giving you a percentage of the contract, I'm going to pay you a larger percentage of gross profit. If it was my company, it'd be somewhere between 10 and 15% of job costed delivered gross profit, right? And so if you want to be really smart about it, give them half of their estimated gross profit with each draw collected, and then or half of their performance commission based on the draws being collected, and then the other half after job cost, right? And so quarterly, you look at the commissions earned, you deduct the draw, and then that's their quarterly performance bonus. That one trick right there, in my humble opinion, is what allowed my first client. Well, between that and then the project manager, who you put on a fixed salary, so they're no longer incentivized to milk the clock. They're incentivized to be efficient because they want to go home early. And then you pay them a percentage of the gross of the contract, or a percentage of gross profit. I prefer gross profit, so that they start negotiating with subcontractors. They start tightly managing material and returning it, and they're very efficient with their schedules, right? So the performance compensation tied with the PDPM system, in my opinion, is the 1-2 punch that allowed client number one to go from about 2% net on 7.9 million in sales to well over it was, my gosh, Net after taxes, probably 11 points, but before taxes, closer to 15 to 16, maybe 17. I haven't seen the numbers in a while, but yeah, to go from 2% net on 7.9 million in sales to over 1.1 million net on over 10 million in sales, and to do that in 6 months in terms of contract value. It took a full year to realize that. It's incredible, right? This stuff doesn't happen overnight. Like, we can fix your company on paper in about 6 months, and then it'll be in your bank account before the end of the year. So then the next lesson I learned, we talked about performance compensation. We talked about the project director, project manager system. The next lesson I learned was the PM sub model, right? No lead carpenters. No, I want, sure, my project managers have tool belts, but that's only because they're responsible for doing their own punch list. And that's to motivate them to utilize our 19 trade phase quality control checklists to do punch list as we go. Because getting a subcontractor to come back to do punch list, it's like pulling teeth. And the longer we wait, the more pissed off the homeowner gets, the less likely of you getting a review, the more likely of you getting hassle on getting your final payment. So it's better off to have your project manager do it, or pay a really, like just pay another, self-employed 50 something remodeler that knows everything to come in and do punch behind your guys. That's another lesson I learned. But back to why subcontractors. When you look at the big boys like J.E. Dunn, a $1 billion commercial general contractor out of Kansas City, they don't self-perform anything except sales, design, project management, right? And the reason for that is, with subcontracts, you define and control your risk, because employees, you have to pay them for their time. Subs, they're not getting paid until the subcontract is satisfied. So the guys out there saying, I have more control over my employees, is absolutely bullshit. Your employees have control over you, right? Yeah, what they really mean is they haven't mastered the contracts. Because if they understood contracts, and if they understood design, and if they understood estimates, they would have airtight, like dead to rights contracts where either the project's built and you get paid, or it's not, right? And if you're really smart, the other lesson I learned is, especially with subs, you buy the material. Unless it's MEP, where they can buy their installation material, but we buy all the material to include finishes and fixtures for MEP. Number one, that eliminates another layer of markup. Number two, that when you control your logistics, you control the construction schedule. So why on God's green earth are we delegating control of our schedule when we're the only ones accountable for that schedule to the homeowner? Doesn't make any sense to me. So between control of logistics, control of schedule, control of quality, control of cash flows, control of risk, that's why I will never self-perform anything again, unless it's like handyman level stuff that doesn't require design. Not happening. Absolutely not happening. So anyway, so all those lessons learned, right? When you wrap it all together, that's how we took client number one from 2% on 2% net on basically when you look at, when I looked at the P&L for 2022, it showed me like 220 grand net, maybe 250, I forget. It was about 2% of 7.9 million in sales. And it ended up on, before taxes, 6 months later, we grew the company by 3 million in sales top line on an annualized basis, and net profit jumped to 17% before taxes. At least that was during my interview with client number one. But anyway, so yeah, take it for what it is. That's what I learned from failing my first contractor. I put all those lessons into practice with client number one, and I'm back to being a contractor again as a partner in the Bellevue office of NSS Home, which is a luxury design build firm in Bellevue, Washington. That is part of our Contractor Charity Challenge, where I was challenged to take $100 in a truck and initially build $1 million contractor in 90 days. That's too easy. So we made it 2 million in 180 days. That's about to be too easy. So we're going to make it 2 million built in a year. So if you want to follow along to see how I've applied all of these lessons, if you want to see these lessons get applied in real time, just check out the Charity Contractor. And if you, if you're in a position like I was, where you weren't estimating correctly, your jobs were upside down, it feels like the more you sell, the more you end up owing. If you're in a situation like that, follow the YouTube channel. Just follow the YouTube channel, follow it very closely. The lessons you're going to find in there for free are going to get you out of that hole. And then when you get out of that hole, come find me, and we'll start remodeling your remodeler or remodeling your custom home builder to build a business that runs on systems instead of your direct supervision, that is capable of adding 1 to 2.5 million per year profitably. All right, guys, be good.